afternoon. Happy Wednesday. Thank you so much for showing up to at the packed house for another wonderful forum here with the Columbus Metropolitan Club. My name is Matt Barnes, morning co-anchor of NBC4 Today. I'm also a member of the CMC Board of Trustees. We want to thank today's forum sponsors, the Ohio Capital Corporation for Housing, as well as Carlisle, Patchen, and Murphy. Also, today's live stream is presented by the Emergency Response Fund of the Columbus Foundation in partnership with the Columbus Dispatch. Let's give them a round of applause for supporting today's forum. I think there's a reason why we have a packed house tonight, because this is a topic that I think we all have interest in, and we have for some time, and it's very important to the city of Columbus. The Columbus housing strategy calls for new investment and policies to help address the deepening housing crisis in our capital city here. Our speakers today will explore the complex causes of the current housing crisis and an array of interconnected solutions. I'm going to welcome up to the stage now Kaufman, the CEO of today's sponsor, the Ohio Capital Corporation for Housing, to introduce today's speakers. Kaufman?
Thank you. Hi, once again, I'm Kaufman, President and CEO of Ohio Capital Corporation for Housing, and we are a financial intermediary partnering with many of you and many of those folks that can bring capital to our Central Ohio neighborhoods and communities. And we bring this capital in to specifically work on affordable housing issues, affordable housing development, and projects in our own backyard. Ohio Capital has brought over $5.9 billion, and that's billion with a B, to Ohio and our contiguous states, specifically for affordable housing. And we're very proud of the fact that that equity, that capital, has created or rehabilitated over 1,000 projects and preserved or created over 60,000 affordable housing units. And I'm so very proud of the fact that Ohio Capital, through this business, we've been able to make grants of over $40 million of our profits contributing back to the communities, and organizations through our Ohio Community Impact Corporation. So these dollars are used to better the day-to-day lives of those folks living in our affordable housing units. And it's for various programs, anything from arts, education, financial literacy, computer training, internet connectivity, all kinds of various programs to better the lives of our families in our communities. So we are very proud to sponsor today's discussion and the important conversation that needs to continue and needs to occur with the folks in this room. So we would like to thank you for joining us today, and let's welcome our panelists for today's discussion. So first, we have Otto Beatty III, President of the Otto Beatty Companies. We have Patty McClimon, Senior Vice President and Chief Strategy Officer for Nationwide Children's Hospital. And we have Erin, the Assistant Director of Housing Strategies for the City of Columbus. And our host, Bonnie Meibers, reporter with Columbus Business First. And you can learn more about our speakers and their bios in your today's forum flyer. And to set the stage for today's panel, it is our great honor to welcome and invite Columbus Mayor Andrew J. Ginther to the podium for opening remarks. Mayor Ginther, welcome.
Good afternoon. What a great day here in the city of Columbus. I know we're here to talk about housing, but on a day as significant as today, the first day of school in our community, and when you're making the Wall Street Journal and Good Morning America for all the wrong reasons, it's time for us to pause collectively as a community and lift up the leadership of the CEA and the Board of Education. If you're like me, a person of faith, you pray. If not, send good vibes, well wishes, positive energy. They meet today at 1 o'clock. And I just got off the phone with the leadership of both, and I told them we as a community needed their very best today. Our kids deserve it. Central Ohio is in the midst of a housing crisis. We don't have enough housing at any price point, market rate, workforce, subsidized, or affordable. The Columbus region has become a magnet for national corporations, vibrant startups, talented people, and the tech sector. From 2009 to 2019, the region added more than 140,000 new jobs and nearly 300,000 neighbors. And that's great. But we've built only a little over 50,000 new housing units. 140,000 new jobs, 300,000 people, 50,000 housing units. We have a supply and demand problem. It's not a sustainable trajectory. We need to be far closer to adding a new housing unit for every 1.5 jobs we bring to this community. And we're not going to stop creating jobs. We've been a relatively affordable community because we've had more housing supply than housing demand. That's just no longer true. That decrease in our surplus housing is why we're seeing rents continue to increase and home prices rise. If we continue to build housing in our region at the current rate, then by 2030, we will have less housing than we have families who need housing. Let me repeat that. In less than 8 years, we'll be over the cliff where demand fully eclipses supply. For many of us, that means it's getting more expensive and more competitive to buy a house or rent an apartment in the Columbus region. And for anyone making less than $60,000 a year, teachers, firefighters, security guards, chefs, bus drivers, nursing assistants, it's getting harder just to get by. If, however, we double the number of housing units, as I've called for, then we'll have a healthy housing market that is more affordable for families from all different walks of life. If you work in Central Ohio, you should be able to afford to live here. That's something that we should commit to and aspire to realize. That's why we've developed the Columbus Housing Strategy, to build the housing we need and include everyone in our region's prosperity. First and foremost, the housing strategy says that we must build more housing at all price levels. I'm calling on our region to double the number of units coming to market at all price points in the next 15 years. As the City of Columbus, we're working to streamline our codes, policies, and processes so that units can be built without unnecessary cost and delay. We must also deliberately invest our dollars and resources for equity. In Columbus, our housing strategy commits us to doing 3 things: preserve, invest, and include. First, we must preserve existing affordability and protect residents from evictions and displacement. Councilmember Favor has led the important work of legislating robust tenant protections to improve housing stability for renters through her Housing for All effort. In addition, we will continue to allocate federal COVID emergency rental assistance, and our housing division will expand programs for low-income homeowners who are at risk of losing their homes. Second, we must invest in new affordable housing for families and individuals. In 2019, the City of Columbus included an unprecedented housing issue as part of our successful bond package, authorizing $50 million to help fund affordable housing. Those bond funds helped us to leverage more than $300 million in public and private funding to build more than 1,300 new units. These units came online at a rate twice as fast as the market had previously done without assistance. This November, I'll ask voters to approve another bond package. If approved by our voters, it will authorize $200 million for affordable housing, 4 times as much as we did in 2019. Columbus residents will begin voting on this issue in less than 2 months, and it's crucial that we are successful. Finally, we need to include everyone in mixed-income neighborhoods. A couple earning $50,000 per year with 2 children should be able to choose where their family lives in Central Ohio. This is why the City of Columbus just updated our residential tax abatement policy to ensure that more affordable units are available in some of our highest rent neighborhoods. We're also exploring ways to expand Black home ownership and align our housing investments with our transportation plans to ensure long-term connectivity and access. Let me be clear. Central Ohio's housing crisis is not a Columbus problem. It is a regional problem. But Columbus's role in the region is to lead. That's exactly what we're doing. But we need our suburban neighbors to join us in this effort. We need the private sector and fellow Central Ohio municipalities to join us in creating affordable housing and to identify new strategies for adding density. Candidly, we see some communities that are doing their part and others that are building higher fences. That's not sustainable, and that is not the Columbus way. We must recognize that the additional housing we need isn't just in other people's neighborhoods. It's in our own. We have a responsibility to embrace greater density. We need to welcome more residents, especially in neighborhoods with direct access to jobs and transportation. As a region, we have big choices to make. And I argue that the next 10 years will be the most consequential in this community's century. Are we willing to make the tough decisions? Are we willing to come together as a region to make sure that every person and every family has a place here? Doing nothing is one choice, but if we do nothing, we will lose some of the very things that make this region such a desirable place to live: our affordability, livability, and diversity. I think we see a different vision for a future in Central Ohio, one where all families have a safe, stable housing that meets their needs and is in the neighborhood of their choice. Now I'm pleased to introduce Bonnie Meibers from Business First, who's going to moderate today's conversation. Bonnie?
Thanks, Mayor Ginther, and thanks again to CMC for having all of us up here today. Like the mayor said, my name's Bonnie Meibers, and I'm a reporter at Columbus Business First. And to have as in-depth a conversation as I think we'd all like to have on this topic today, we'd probably actually need a couple of days. So I'm just going to jump right in and get started with our panelists. And my first question is going to be for everybody, but we'll start with you, Erin, and just move down the line. Can you describe your role in housing?
Sure, happy to. Again, I'm Erin Prosser. I have the privilege of serving as the city's first Assistant Director of Housing Strategies. That was a position that was created last year, really with the recognition by the mayor and city leadership that there needed to be a really concerted effort to how we were regulating our housing, how we were investing in housing, how the city was participating in the housing market to make sure that we were able to deliver what the growing city needs. And I think this opportunity to really think through what the needs are, and then also to spend the time and energy to implement the housing strategy that the mayor just laid out is the primary part of my responsibilities.
I'm Patty McClimon from Nationwide Children's Hospital. People often ask what Nationwide Children's is doing in the housing business, but when you look at what is the best outcome of health, it is often not the health care that people receive when they are in the hospital. It is the social determinants of health, in particular the housing, the neighborhood, the schools, the environment, and I'm speaking of children, that we find these kids in. And if we don't start with housing, we are never going to get them to their best health outcome. So about 12 years ago, Nationwide Children's got into the housing business focused entirely on maintaining affordable housing in the neighborhood closest to the hospital. We have now expanded into Linden, and we are really looking at how to create that healthy environment so that kids can be their best selves and achieve their best outcome.
Good afternoon. I am Otto Beatty, and before I go to my role, let me speak about who I am. My family arrived in Columbus over 80 years ago, seeking opportunity. And that is what I want for all of our citizens the chance for opportunity. I've never been housing burdened. I've never been housing insecure. And that is because this community has supported me and my family. My grandmother, when I was a young boy, my grandmother said to my father, "Son, don't you forget whose sandwich, you don't know whose sandwich sent you to college." So when I retired from law and went into entrepreneurship and got into freedom, I chose to direct my time, talents, and passions to some of our community's largest problems. I'm also inspired every day by being the husband of Christy Angel, CEO of the YWCA, who is an operator of supported permanent housing and a family shelter, and a true advocate for our most vulnerable citizens. Now, professionally, I'll turn to that quickly. Over the last 20 years, I've been a volunteer with the City of Columbus on various commissions at the neighborhood level in the Northeast Area Commission, at a city level for the Development Commission under another administration, and most recently in the Downtown Development Commission. And so I've seen many projects from large scale to small scale come before us and the people that are involved in making those happen. And again, I am a small businessman. Once I retired from law, and I had businesses in 5 different underserved neighborhoods. And most of my businesses were in the service industry. Most of my employees, probably 95%, made under $50,000 a year. In 2002, after I acquired my first business, when I received my first W-2, looking at the W-2s I was handing out, and I saw a W-2 under $20,000 a year, and I knew that was somebody that came to work every day. I understood the meaning of the working poor. And so now, again, I'm turning my attention to this problem and going into some small-scale development.
And can the three of you define affordable housing? What kind of housing are we talking about today?
I can start with that. I think one of the challenges around the housing conversation is sort of this definition of affordability that I think we kind of get deep into and kind of understanding what that looks like. And I think what we want to talk about is housing affordability. And that means that your family's not paying more than 30% of your income on your housing expenses. So that would be your rent or mortgage plus your utility bills. And that allows you the ability to pay for high-quality childcare, to save money to buy a house in the future, all the other things we think are important as a Columbus resident should have, and the ability to not just be able to afford your housing, but to be able to make a determination about where that housing best fits your family's needs, and making sure that those opportunities are available throughout the city and throughout the region. And so I think as we know that we are a growing city, we have this unique position to see where our peer cities have come about 10 years before us and where they really experienced that loss of affordability, right? They did not keep up with the supply as they were growing in their population, and they continued to lose that natural affordability. Central Ohio has been an affordable place for a lot of decades, right? Because we had enough housing. When you look at 2010 coming out of the recession in the housing market of 2008, we had about 12% more housing than we had households in the region. Fast forward just to 2020, so in 10 years, again, that population growth that the mayor mentioned, fast forward 10 years, we have just 4% additional housing to the households that are in our community, and that is before Intel joins our community. And where we are going to see an even greater acceleration in that job creation and in that population growth as we continue to be a place for folks to move for opportunity. And so as we continue to not only just manage the overall affordability, and then making sure that we're investing in housing that the market isn't going to bring into our community naturally, right? So there's a cost to new construction. We need to subsidize that new construction so those rents are affordable to folks generally below $50,000 a year in household income. So I think we kind of talk about two different things, the overall affordability of the housing market, and then making sure that we are being really deliberate about housing that the market itself isn't going to naturally deliver. And partners like Nationwide Children's and other folks that I see across the room here that are making those investments with the resources that they can pull together, both local resources through things like the housing bond that we have, but also our state and federal resources. So I think those are kind of the two ways I would catch the affordable housing definition. So that's broadly how I think we're looking at it.
So well said.
Do you have anything to add?
I was just going to add that I agree with Erin's definition of affordability at 30% of an income, but it also needs to be affordable in what people consider their neighborhood. So we need to avoid displacement, and we need to make sure that we are getting a mix of incomes in any neighborhood so that someone doesn't have to move 35 miles from their job in order to be considered affordable, or they don't have the opportunity to be in the school system that they want to be in. So the mayor's comment about making sure that we're including people in those affordable, that it's a mixed income neighborhood is also a critical definition of affordability.
And I would just add, in addition to those definitions of affordability, we must also speak about, housing choice and opportunity. And different people at different stages of life need to have the opportunity to choose different neighborhoods, but also different types of housing. And our current housing code does not allow for all the different types of housing that could be available. I know many of the people in this room, when they were in college, maybe they lived in a rooming house, one room and shared a kitchen and things like that. Okay, you couldn't do that now for an adult population. That probably the code wouldn't allow that. But there's someone, it might not be anyone's choice now to live in that type of housing, but that might be the right choice for someone. That security guard who's 60 years old, trying to save for retirement, trying to have a little extra money to maybe go see his children in another state. So different housing types, duplexes, triplexes, tiny houses, open up the code to allow for these things and give people more housing choices, and that'll contribute to the affordability.
And I know we've touched a little bit on the city's new housing strategy, but Erin, can you just outline what's in that and how it's going to provide for this issue?
Yes, absolutely. And so the mayor, kind of walked through the framework that we're going to be working under in the city of Columbus, and not just in our housing division, not just in our planning division, but really across all of the city departments to make sure that we're right-sizing the way that we're investing in housing, regulating housing, all the ways that we can impact that market to make sure that we're doing it in a way that meets the need Columbus faces today and not necessarily the Columbus of the 20th century, right? And so I think as we look forward to that strategy, build is going to be the foundation. Again, if we don't maintain our natural affordability, there aren't enough resources to subsidize our way out of the problem. If we don't have that natural supply to fill not just the folks that are coming into our community, but to make sure that those in our community today aren't displaced because of that rising housing costs, right? It really is going to work across a lot of our neighborhoods to help stabilize that housing market. And it is going to mean that we really unlock the ability to build residential. As Otto said, there's a lack of our ability to build some of the types of housing that we need in our community, things that meet the needs of families at different points. We are going to undergo, for the first time in 70 years, the update to our zoning code. This is an effort that's going to take a lot of community engagement and partnership with the city. But if we can get that to be that 21st century code, to be responsive to the city that we are today, then we have a real meaningful chance to build the units. The mayor was very clear, this is not just a city of Columbus issue, and that those number of units cannot just occur within the boundaries of the city of Columbus, but they need to occur regionally. And we need all of our regional partners to start to decide how they're going to build new units in their community, how they're going to add a diversity of unit types into their community so that you can have your residents aging in place. You can have young people come into your community. All the different ways in which we've sort of siloed housing and made it so that you don't have those options within individual communities. And so this is going to be a collective conversation we have over the next number of years about how we become the city that we are already growing into and do it in a way that's equitable and manageable for us. And then I think The market itself, it's one thing to have kind of a housing boom, right, and build a lot of units in our region, but we know that we also have to do things to help mitigate some of the impacts of our growth. We need to be actively preserving and protecting, right? So that's really going to be preserving some of the naturally occurring affordability that we have in our communities through strategic acquisition and some other opportunities that we'll be exploring. It's also about protecting our tenants. The mayor mentioned Councilmember Favor and her Housing for All tenant protections that she's worked on and continues to work on for protecting our low-income renters. And then our low-income homeowners in the community, making sure that we have enough programs to support them so they can stay in their homes. As Patty mentioned, we need to include. It doesn't just matter the volume we build. We need to make sure that we're providing opportunities throughout the city so that families can choose based on the school that their children attend, the church that they go to. Whatever is meaningful to that family, then they need to be able to have an opportunity. And I think that's where we're looking at inclusive housing policies, where we can build in that affordability, build in that economic diversity in our communities. Partnerships like Nationwide Children's helps facilitate that so we have economically diverse neighborhoods and opportunities throughout the city. And then finally, the invest piece, which we talked a little bit about. There's housing that, because of the cost of construction, is going to be too expensive for that rent to be where we need it to be for some of our working families. And so we, the City of Columbus, have deployed that $50 million in the housing bond that was approved by voters in 2019 to produce more than 1,300 new affordable units throughout the City of Columbus. That was in partnership with our really strong affordable housing development partners in the city. That ability to bring those units into the community, not just on the rental side, but we also need to be looking at affordable home ownership, right? Affordability doesn't only need to live within our rental population. It can also live in the wealth building space and giving folks the opportunity to get into that space as wealth building, not just in rental. And I think we'll be looking at just housing stabilization programs and making sure that we learn the lessons that we've seen through COVID-19 and evictions and displacement, and how we with emergency rental assistance can help support families to stay in their homes so that we're not needing to relocate them or find new housing for them.
And since you mentioned that the affordable housing bond, could you talk about what's in the bond that will be on the ballot in November? Like, what's in it? What's the cost to taxpayers? How's it going to help this issue?
Correct. And so it is a really important tool for us to be able to, again, put dollars into those projects to build units that wouldn't come online without that assistance. And the great part about the housing bond is, one, it does not result in an increase in taxes for our taxpayers. It is the authorization of the sale of bonds, and that will allow us to invest in affordability in the community. And I think that's a really important part of what we learned from the 2019 bond, which was, somewhat of a, let's see if this is the test balloon, if it's really going to make an impact. And when you see it paired with all the other public funding, our private partners that are part of this conversation, you start to see how incredibly powerful that money becomes in terms of leveraging other dollars. Franklin County Magnet funds are paired with our bond funds, certainly Ohio Housing Finance Agency and the Low-Income Housing Tax Credit Program. It really allows us to put a lot of different pieces and parts together to bring as many units in that affordable realm, kind of for folks and families that are earning below $50,000. So we'll be asking again for that, and the results and the outcomes of the $50 million made it clear that it was a really valuable tool for us to bring affordability. So the mayor has called for an escalation of 4 times that value to bring even more units into the community. And I think we'll be looking at not only that affordable rental, but affordable home ownership through important projects like the Central Ohio Community Land Trust and the ways that we can build in that home ownership opportunity for families. And again, thinking about how we stabilize families in our community and how we find enough funding so that they can stay in their housing, be they tenants or low-income homeowners, so that we don't have displacement in those families as we move forward.
I think Erin makes a really important point about leveraging the bond funds with partners. So whether Otto's doing it as a private developer or Nationwide Children's is doing it as a corporate citizen, none of us do it alone, right? We partner with the city, we partner, I know Nationwide Children's partners, some of them are in the room, whether it's faith-based communities like New Salem or CD4AP, or people in the affordable housing group like AHACO and Affordable Housing Trust and OCCH, of course. But those dollars that we pass then allow for that spectrum of housing, rental, home ownership. Home repair is an important piece to stabilize people who aren't able to make those investments into the homes that have been in their families for years. And so it's a critical piece to bringing the community together through partnership.
And I think it's important to point out, when you hear, this bond package is following the earlier one for 50 million, correct? Is that the right number? And you can see in the chat, you could probably see on social media, well, we know who's going to get that, the big developers. And I'm here to say that that is not always the case, both with the bond funds as well as through the tax abatement program. Those projects may make the headlines, but I will tell you, in the tax abatement program, there have been individuals who have renovated a duplex or bought or done something with a single family home that in a underserved neighborhood who've been able to access those funds. So I just wanted to point that out, because I know the headlines, the letters to the editor and otherwise, whatever, seem to focus many on more benefits to make developers rich.
Well, and Otto, could you tell us about your project on Parkwood Avenue and why it's special?
Surely. So it's called Parkwood Headquarters, and it's an example of a small project in an underserved neighborhood that could not have come to fruition, and we're probably going to deliver in the next 3 to 4 months, without the help of the City of Columbus, the Franklin County and Columbus Port Authority, the Affordable Housing Trust, the State Historic Preservation Office, and a wide variety of partners to make sure this works out. But what is the result? What does all that mean? So our particular project, a couple weeks ago at CMC, you had the Columbus Landmarks. So in 2018, the former headquarters of the Ohio Baptist General Convention was on the 2018 list of most endangered properties. Code violations, blight, et cetera. It was on that list. Fast forward now, it is now going to be transformed to 36 units for members of the community in a neighborhood that has not had a whole lot of new investment. What's powerful is that development is right next to East High School. So you can imagine, for over 25 years, which was the time period where the Ohio Baptist General Convention stopped using it as offices, children were leaving that high school looking at vacant buildings and blight. Now they can see something, coming of age, investment in their particular neighborhood. Did we receive a tax abatement? Yes. Now, we didn't have to worry about the percentages because 100% of the units are affordable. Now, it may not have all the amenities or some of the fancy things. We might not have an exercise room, but we're near Franklin Park. We may not have a car wash bay, but we're a block from the bus stop. And we all know the connection between housing, transportation, and jobs. So don't pull out your smartphone because we don't have the website up yet. But this is an example, again, and this is, I'm new to this field. And I had to go into I went into a joint venture with the Kelly companies, Michael Kelly. And that's an example of how new entrants can come into the marketplace. The other thing that's interesting about that is it was owned by that Ohio Baptist Convention. We didn't just buy them out. They contributed the lands, the dilapidated buildings, and now they're a partner. They're able to share in the cash flow and use that cash to help with their mission. They're able to share in the equity that's going to build up as we pay down the loans, and that'll strengthen their balance sheet. And so for us, this wasn't any type of, get-rich type of thing or anything like that, but I believe that those creative models, which were supported by the city, which were supported by Affordable Housing Trust and the other organizations, needs to be duplicated again and again and again, and we're starting to see that.
We're going to be moving to questions from our live stream and our in-person audiences in just a couple minutes. So if you have a question and you're here in the room, make your way over to the microphone back there. I did have one final question for our panelists, which is, what's overcoming this issue going to look like? How are we going to measure our success in building more affordable housing?
So I think it's going to take creativity and people that haven't traditionally been in the space. So whether that's new developers, whether that's the support from the city, corporations, as we think about what it takes, we've just described that it takes a village, but we need to be thoughtful about NOAA, the naturally occurring affordable housing, and there's a new entity, Columbus Housing Enterprise, that's focused on that. There is the opportunity to use philanthropy to create wraparound services to help people get into the land trust or home ownership. It is the idea that it is not just a developer building something, but a developer being creative around how they're getting their financing, how they're working through who can live there and in an affordable way. And then that takes many people doing those creative things, not just thinking about, I built something and I rent it, but what are the wraparound supports that keep people there and keep the community healthy and safe and a place where people want to stay.
I think, I truly believe that we as Central Ohio region are poised to be the first region nationally that can experience incredible economic growth and manage our equity and affordability for all of our community members. We are having these conversations. The fact that the room is as populated as it is this afternoon to talk about housing, as early as we are in this population growth ahead of Intel coming, is something that didn't happen in our peer cities. These conversations weren't happening until the issue was already at bay, right? The thing that was already at the front door, then they started to have conversations. They're working really hard in cities like Austin and Nashville to make up that ground. But we here in Central Ohio are actually having these conversations really early. The bond packages that have been authorized and are on the November ballot, these are things that our peer cities did years after they were seeing that loss of affordability, trying to recapture some of that. And I think as we have these conversations and getting folks to think differently about how we grow as a city, I mean, I'm a lifelong Columbus kid. It is a different city every decade that we've been here. And I think that's wonderful, right? We have never had a decade in Columbus history that we haven't grown in population. That's not necessarily a given in perpetuity, right? If we don't manage our livability, right, those consequences to our family and the ability for working folks to live in our community and be close to resources and opportunities, if we don't manage that, then we are not going to continue to attract new jobs. We're not going to continue to attract new population. And we're going to be one of those cities that just really shifts in its trajectory. And I don't think that's what any of us are looking for. And I think as we position ourselves to be a stable, welcoming opportunity city, these conversations are the start of that. But the consequences are regional, but the decisions are all made very, very locally. We are all in our own neighborhoods having these conversations, and we all have to have a different conversation about how we see Columbus growing. And I think that's going to be where the rubber hits the road, right? And we're going to make big policy changes, and we're going to have big investments, but it's in these individual decisions and in the conversations that you all have back in your communities where we're going to see if whether or not we have the ability to grow in a different way than our peer cities have in the past. And I think that's the opportunity, and one that I'm very optimistic about in our region compared to where our peers were even a decade ago. And I think that's one that I think is that we can actually realize.
Do you have anything to add, Otto?
Just quickly, and it's already been said, there's certainly no silver bullet to solving this, but maybe that overhaul of the zoning code becomes the bronze bullet. I'm new to this space, but one thing I quickly learned in my travels and talking to more experienced developers is that most projects are bottlenecked, stalled, and even lost at what's called the pre-development or entitlement stage. And that's the process of interacting, getting the governmental and community approvals for a project. And again, projects can go from a planned 100 units down to 70 units, and then it doesn't work. Or a use that you're looking for, hey, we've got this lot, we want to put 4 units on it, not just a single, it's dead. So I don't want to underestimate the importance of that, overhaul. And I will say that the consultants that you chose are first class and excellent. Now it's just about execution.
It's CMC's longstanding tradition to take audience questions. Doug Buchanan of CMC is curating questions from our live stream audience, and then for those of us in person in the room, which looks like there's a couple, join Doug at the microphone if you've got a question. Out of respect for others, please keep your questions brief and to the point, and please keep in mind that questions end with a question mark. Doug, what's the first question?
Bonnie, thank you, and thank you to all of our speakers today for an important conversation. This question was submitted in advance. This comes from Maureen David. Maureen asks, or says, I'd like to see the panel address the issue that a significant number of affordable homes have been snapped up by landlords and investors in the last 15 years, and most of the moderately priced new development is rental property. This keeps those with lower incomes or starter incomes trapped in a cycle of renting and unable to build generational wealth. How can we change that?
I think that we have to be using the creative tools that the city has and the county have put in place. So the land trust has started, and that creates the opportunity to buy a home at less than its built value, but it creates the wealth, keeps part of the wealth in the house, but also builds the wealth for the individual that has purchased the home. I think we also need to look at things like home repair and programs to keep homes in families, as well as new programs like match savings to help people get to their down payment programs. And that would be incumbent upon all the partners that we've identified to build those creative processes so that we can not focus just on rentals, but also across the spectrum to home ownership.
And I think one of the most effective tools we would have to limit the number of investors that are buying up homes in our community is to make sure that we are stabilizing that our housing market, right? The more valuable it becomes because we have the limited supply, the more those folks are going to come knocking at our door. The more that they can make money, then they're going to come into our community. And as we continue to maintain that natural affordability, again, things that we haven't seen in the past, but when there is that value there, we are going to see those folks come in. So again, managing that supply becomes a critical part of addressing that particular issue as well.
Yeah, and on the issue of, supply, and this may be a little controversial, but, there is a danger with the new and continuing emergence of short-term rentals in single-family houses. And other communities are dealing with this a lot more, but it could come to Columbus. So if you think about a Airbnb or a VRBO house, single-family house in a neighborhood, or even an apartment complex, that is taking away an available unit. And there's been creative solutions in some communities, like we're all familiar with gun buyback programs. There's communities that are actually buying units back to incentivize individuals to transform Airbnb units back to permanent rentals or even sell a single-family home in a neighborhood. And again, that goes back again to the point of the code also opening up more housing types to allow for more density and more units as well.
Hi there, my name is Michelle Drakulich, and I've grown up in Columbus, Ohio my whole life. Daughter of a military veteran who worked for the city for 27 years. And I was a young investor at age 28 when I purchased my first condo. On September 15th, I will be involuntarily homeless because my insurance policy, my loss of use policy, will run out of funds. I'm a licensed mortgage broker, and I advocate for housing and building generational wealth for people. So my questions for you today, and I appreciate your time and listening to me, would be a couple things. Who has oversight on property management companies? Who can help me and others living in the LC properties that were built in 2003 timeframe? The LC is very well known in Franklin County. Who can help homebuyers who have been harmed by builder and property management neglect and negligence? Are there any plans to regulate mold to conform to OSHA standards, EPA standards, and standards of current multi-unit properties so that nobody would have to face what I am dealing with today?
I think I can start a little bit leaning on kind of the broader spectrum of the city of Columbus. And I know it's been a really interesting opportunity for me to learn more about what like the city attorney's role with some of these larger apartment and multifamily portfolios. I'm not familiar specifically with what's going on with your property at LC, but certainly one that I think we could talk about. We have folks within the city government that may be open to having some conversations with you about it.
Our next question from the live stream audience comes from Kathy Fox. I'll paraphrase Kathy's question just a bit. If you could wave a magic wand, what would you like to see the local governments in Central Ohio do differently?
Let's start with me on that one. Oh, shoot, I wish I had a magic wand. That would be amazing. That's part of the challenge with all these housing conversations, right, is there's a lot of different mechanisms that are impacting our ability to deliver what we need. But I'll always lean back to the comment that Otto had made earlier, the ability to just go back to building different types of housing, right? We live on a very old street in the city of Columbus, and on our street are duplexes, fourplexes. There's a row house that's for sale product that's almost half of what you would pay for a single family home. Again, that affordable home ownership opportunity. If something happened to our block and it had to be rebuilt tomorrow, it would only be allowed to be single family homes. All of that natural affordability that occurs on our street, and quite frankly, the part that makes our street really lovely and fun, it has lots of different ages, lots of different types of folks in our street. We couldn't do that today. And so back to the conversation, not just about the zoning code, but all the other ancillary parts of our government that weigh in on how we develop housing. I think there's a way to do it and still maintain our community character and make sure that we are building high quality housing for folks, but opening up that diversity of housing types, getting comfortable again with duplexes and fourplexes. Those are really important parts of building back in just the natural affordability and the ability to elevate through the property ladder, right, and stay within a community that's meaningful to you. So that would be my magic wand, is just to really open up again that historic kind of development pattern that allowed a lot of different types of units on a street.
I think if I were waving the wand, I would ask the municipalities to think about all of the other pieces that go to support a house with it. So whether that's transportation, Wi-Fi, as we are thinking about what makes a healthy neighborhood, safety, not only do people want to be able to buy their house or rent a really good quality house, they want to live in a neighborhood that creates that optimal health. And it has to have all of those other components as well. And I know that the governments are trying, but we need to make sure that we're not doing it in a way that doesn't allow for density or doesn't allow for different types of schooling and really strong schools thinking about our youth.
So if I could wave the magic wand, and it would be magic, is that what the mayor started with, that the smaller communities, suburban communities in the region would share in this housing burden and open up the different opportunities for different types of housing.
Hey, good afternoon. I am Carly Booz. I'm the Executive Director at the Affordable Housing Alliance of Central Ohio. Thank you. This has been a wonderful conversation. But I want to ask what we can do in this room. You've got hundreds of people who care and who want to solve this problem. What is something each of us can do tonight or this weekend to help?
Again, I think just piggybacking on what Otto was talking about and kind of what the mayor led with is, again, these consequences are regional. We are not going to be a livable, affordable region if individual decisions continue to be made to suppress our housing development. We need to get comfortable with lots of different types of housing. We need to get comfortable with new neighbors. They are coming to our community. We have this incredible economic development engine, and that is going to be accelerated by the addition of Intel. Change is coming. It's just a matter of whether or not we shape it or whether or not we just let it happen to us. And if we let it happen to us by continuing to not build new residential to accommodate those new residents coming in, we'll continue to see increases in the folks that are ending up in our shelter system. We'll continue to see increases in displacement. We'll have families that are needing to live very far out in order to be able to even afford housing, burdening not only just that family with transportation costs, but our regional transportation network, right? Those are the consequences, and we have the examples from our peer cities that are about 10 to 15 years behind us. We know what the consequences are, but these decisions are made at a hyper-local level, so we just need to be participating in really robust conversations in our communities about what it means when we don't allow units to be constructed in our communities.
I would just say, in short, listen, learn, and share. We all have spheres of influence. This is a very complex issue. Again, I'm new to the field, and as I read more and talk to more, it's very interesting. And although I started my comments about having some privilege, let's have some proximity. We interact with people that are housing insecure every day. And so let's listen, let's learn, let's share.
And I would just add, Erin, on your behalf, support the bond package.
Correct. Yes, that would be very helpful.
Thank you. I know our time is rapidly running out, but we'll have time for one more question from the live stream audience. Lalitha Pemadigantam asks, can you comment on where homeless populations fit into the Columbus housing plan? This is building off of your comments, how are the most vulnerable residents protected and worked with to be brought into the housing market?
I think that's a fantastic question. And again, as we look at our peer cities, we know that one of the consequences to not building enough supply and not providing enough affordable housing is that we will have increased number of folks that are unhoused, right, that are experiencing homelessness. And these are going to be folks that we may not even see in our shelter system, right? They're going to be folks that may be doubling up on couches, sleeping in cars. These are folks that we are working to make sure that there are available housing. And I think it's, again, that pairing of maintaining as much of our naturally affordability as we can so that we're not pushing that down pressure system into those folks and causing that housing instability and that displacement, but then also supporting the folks that are delivering housing for our most vulnerable and making sure that our bond dollars are going into permanent supportive housing, making sure that we are recognizing what those needs are for different types of populations, right? We have conversations, I saw Director Stapleton here around pregnant and parenting mothers and the needs that they have around housing are going to be different than some of our other folks. And really just working with populations to make sure that we understand what those needs are and how we can best address them, but allowing the resources to be put into those places and then not putting additional pressure on that system so that we don't see the outcomes that our peer cities have seen in the increase of number of folks that do lose their housing as a matter of the economic growth.
I would add to that we need to catch people before they slip through the cracks. So as a healthcare system, we screen for housing insecurity at the point of the primary care visit. And so if we can connect people to resources so they can connect to the place that's going to give them a rent help, whether it's COVID or other related, or if we can get them into a spot that allows them to understand the many resources that are available, that is safe. I see we have people from the Center for Family Safety and Healing. We need to make sure that the housing is safe, and whether it's a mom expecting or someone trying to get rid of abuse, we have those opportunities to get them into something that's permanent, supportive, and also using the resources and drawing down on federal resources that are available.
Yes, and I just say to our city leaders and others, essentially just aggressively pursue, allocate, and execute all the federal dollars, state dollars, and any other resources you can get your hands on for this problem.
Well, we wish we had more time to have this conversation, but we're going to welcome Matt back up for concluding remarks.
Yeah, there's just not enough time to tackle this issue, that is for sure. But I want to thank all of you for being here. Hope you found today's forum thought-provoking. This is a very complex issue, but it's great to see this many community partners and organizations in the room, hoping that we can really get something done here. And because if we don't, frankly, this is a great city to live in, but if you can't afford to, or you can't find a place to live in it, doesn't really matter, does it? So it's good to see everyone in here listening, and let's keep the conversation going. Thank you to today's sponsors once again, the Ohio Capital Corporation for Housing, as well as Carlisle, Patchen, and Murphy. Thanks to our online virtual seat patrons, like my mom, hello. She said I did a good job in the intro, so I know she's watching. And to the Emergency Response Fund of the Columbus Foundation for presenting our live stream in partnership with the Columbus Dispatch. Of course, a special appreciation to all of our speakers, the mayor, Andy Ginther, Otto, Beatty, Patty McClimon, Erin Prosser, and our host, Bonnie Meibers. Make sure you join us next Wednesday. You have a free one to give away, so get someone else here. Next Wednesday, our History Means Tourism for Ohio. Let's bring more people to our city, right? With Tracy Townsend, Megan Wood, and Napoleon Bell. So that'll be another fantastic conversation. Again, thank you all for joining us. This is the largest one I think we've had in a long time. This is fantastic to see a full house here at the Boathouse. We couldn't do this without you. Hope you'll think about becoming a member, lifetime member, whatever it might be, or if not, just come next Wednesday as the Columbus Metropolitan Club presents another community conversation. Thank you. Drive safe. Have a great day.